Thomas Grady walked out of his house for a simple errand, a quick trip to buy cigarettes. Hours later, his wife, Rachel, would report him missing, but not just because he was gone. She would accuse him of a crime so dark it would unravel everything they knew about their seemingly perfect life. What happened between the moment Thomas left the door and the moment his wife became the prime suspect in his murder? The truth was far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. On a chilly Friday evening in late October, Thomas Grady left his house in Denton Falls, a quiet town nestled between wooded hills and forgotten highways. He told his wife, Rachel, that he was just running out to buy a pack of cigarettes from the nearby gas station. It was around 8:30 p.m. when he stepped outside, leaving behind his wallet, his half-finished dinner, and his phone charging on the kitchen counter. The only things he took with him were his car keys and his jacket. It seemed like a typical, unremarkable moment in an ordinary life. But Thomas never came back. Rachel waited, glancing at the clock every few minutes. At first, she assumed he had bumped into someone he knew, or decided to grab a drink at the tavern a few streets over. It wasn't unusual for Thomas to lose track of time, but as the minutes turned to hours, her unease grew into full-blown worry. She tried calling his phone before realizing it was still in the kitchen. By midnight, she had called the gas station down the road to ask if anyone matching his description had been in that night. No one had. She got in the car herself, retracing the route he would have taken, checking every convenience store, every intersection, every spot he might have pulled. There was no sign of him or his car. At 4:12 a.m., she made the call to the police. She told the dispatcher her husband had left the house for cigarettes and hadn't come back. It wasn't like him, she insisted. He never disappeared without saying something. The dispatcher took down the information, asked the routine questions, and said an officer would be sent over. Rachel sat by the front window in silence, staring out at the dark, empty street. Her husband was out there somewhere, and she didn't know if he was hurt, hiding, or worse. When police arrived, they asked if there had been an argument before Thomas left. Rachel said no. They asked if he had any enemies, any debt, anything unusual happening in his life. Again, she said no. He was a personal trainer at the local gym, popular with clients and co-workers. He was responsible, friendly, a little impulsive sometimes, but never reckless. Officers issued a bolo, be on the lookout, for Thomas's 2010 silver Honda Accord and added his name to the National Missing Persons database. By mid-morning, the small town was buzzing. Missing person flyers went up at intersections and coffee shops. Friends and neighbors joined search parties, combing the roads and surrounding woods. But there were no leads, no credit card activity, no GPS pings, no security footage placing him anywhere. It was as if Thomas had vanished into thin air the moment he left his driveway. As day turned into night again, a strange and subtle shift took place. Concern turned into suspicion. The question was no longer just, where was Thomas Grady, but what happened after he walked out that door? And for some, a darker question began to rise. Did someone close to him know more than they were saying? The investigation into Thomas Grady's disappearance quickly escalated from a routine missing person case to something far more complex. In the first 48 hours, police followed standard procedure, checking hospitals, tracking his known routes, and reviewing any security camera footage from nearby businesses. When nothing turned up, detectives expanded their search radius. That's when they found something strange. At 9:12 p.m., just over half an hour after Thomas left home, His car had been spotted by a traffic camera turning off the main road, heading toward an old industrial zone that had been shut down for years. It was a place with no gas stations, no stores, no reason for anyone to go there. The footage was grainy, and the streetlight above the intersection had been out for months, but the car's license plate was just clear enough to confirm it was Thomas's Honda Accord. He had gone in, but no camera ever caught him coming back out. Officers sent a team to the industrial site. They found nothing at first, just broken glass, rusted fences, and scattered debris. But deeper into the overgrown lot, they discovered skid marks and an empty cigarette box on the ground. There were no signs of a struggle, but the area had an eerie silence to it, the kind that settled only where time and people had long moved on. Back at the station, investigators reviewed Thomas's phone records. There were no calls or texts after he left the house. But one curious detail stood out. The last known GPS signal from his phone had come from the same industrial site shortly before it went dark. Then came another anomaly. His bank account had a pending transaction for $78 at a gas station 20 miles outside Denton Falls. It had been swiped at 9:47 p.m., about an hour after he was last seen. Detectives rushed to the location and obtained the store's security footage. What they saw raised more questions than answers. The man driving Thomas's car and swiping the card was wearing Thomas's distinctive black gym jacket, but his face wasn't a match. He was younger, thinner, and clearly trying to keep his head low. He spent less than 2 minutes inside, bought snacks, filled a gas can, and left. Thomas wasn't with him. The car was later found 2 days after that stop, burned out in a wooded area just off a county back road. Nothing was left inside except melted plastic, charred upholstery, and a cigarette pack fused to the dashboard. The case, once a straightforward missing person report, had turned into a puzzle of conflicting timelines, mysterious movements, and an unknown suspect driving the victim's car. Why would someone steal the car, use the credit card, and then torch the vehicle miles away? And why had Thomas driven to the abandoned industrial site in the first place? As detectives pieced together the events of that night, they couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a random disappearance. It was something else, something carefully planned, and behind it all, they suspected, was someone Thomas knew. 3 days after Thomas Grady's disappearance, the investigation took an unexpected and dramatic turn. Rachel Grady walked into the Denton Falls Police Department with trembling hands and a story no one was prepared to hear. She didn't come with a lawyer, nor had the police asked her to return. She came voluntarily, saying she couldn't live with the weight of what she knew any longer. What she said next changed the entire direction of the case. Rachel told detectives that Thomas had confessed to her months earlier that he had killed a man named Marcus Delaney. The name meant nothing to the investigators at first. No missing person report had ever been filed for anyone by that name. No one in town knew a Marcus Delaney, and there were no local records of anyone by that name living or working in the area. Rachel claimed that Marcus was a drifter, someone Thomas had met through the gym, and that an argument between them had escalated into violence. According to her, Thomas had struck Marcus with a hammer during a late-night confrontation in the woods behind an old hunting trail and buried the body there to cover it up. It sounded unbelievable, too precise, too detailed for someone with no direct involvement. But when she provided exact GPS coordinates to the burial site, investigators were compelled to act. A search team was sent to the location, and within hours they discovered human remains buried beneath a thin layer of soil and branches. The shallow grave was crude, but effective enough to have gone unnoticed for months. Alongside the body were scraps of clothing, a broken smartphone, and the rusted head of a hammer. Rachel also led detectives to a loose floorboard in their garage. Underneath it, wrapped in a gym towel, was another hammer, this one stained with dried, dark residue later confirmed to be blood. There was no denying it now. A murder had taken place, and Thomas Grady had been involved. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Marcus Delaney, a man with a long history of minor offenses and no known address. He had been arrested once in a neighboring county, which helped complete the identification. Rachel insisted she hadn't come forward earlier because she was afraid of Thomas. She said he had threatened her, told her that if she spoke to anyone, she'd end up in the same grave. The story painted Thomas as a cold, calculating killer. To many, it made sense. His strange disappearance, the abandoned car, the erratic movements that night. Maybe he had been trying to flee justice or tie up loose ends. But something about Rachel's confession didn't sit right. Her timing, her calm demeanor, and the way she handed over evidence so conveniently raised quiet suspicions. Some investigators began to wonder if she truly was a frightened wife, or if she had carefully constructed a narrative that left out one critical detail, her own involvement. And if that was the case, what really happened to Thomas after he walked out that night? As police tried to piece together Rachel's explosive claims, a new character unexpectedly emerged in the story. Someone who would upend everything the investigators thought they knew. 4 days after the discovery of Marcus Delaney's body, a man named Nathan Bell walked into the Denton Falls Police Department, pale and visibly shaken. He said he had seen Thomas Grady the night he disappeared. Not only that, he claimed to have been involved in what happened afterward. Nathan was 26 years old, unemployed, and living with a friend in a nearby town. His criminal record was limited to petty theft and disorderly conduct. What he told police added a new, disturbing dimension to the case. He said that Thomas had approached him weeks earlier at a bar, offering him cash to help clean up a mess in the woods. Nathan thought it was a drug deal or a way to scare someone off, nothing he hadn't seen before. But when the night came and they drove out into the woods, Nathan realized the job was far worse than he imagined. According to his statement, Thomas led him down an overgrown trail to a remote patch of forest. There, he pointed to a spot in the ground and told Nathan to dig. It wasn't long before Nathan's shovel hit something solid. He uncovered the edge of a tarp and, inside it, the decaying remains of Marcus Delaney. At that moment, Nathan panicked. He said he shouted at Thomas, refused to go any further, and fled the scene. But before running off, he grabbed Thomas's car keys and jacket, claiming he was scared for his life and needed to get away fast. He took the car, stopped at a gas station to buy fuel, and then drove aimlessly for hours before setting the vehicle on fire and hitchhiking back home. Nathan's fingerprints matched those found on the gas can and the cigarette pack inside the burned car. He was also identified in the gas station surveillance footage. His DNA was later recovered from the handle of the shovel found at the grave site. Everything he said was lining up. Nathan was guilty of tampering with evidence, maybe even obstructing justice. But it appeared he hadn't committed murder. The investigators were now staring at a chilling reality. Thomas had returned to the scene of the crime months later, not to hide it, but to dig it back up. The question was, why? Was he planning to move the body, destroy evidence, turn himself in? But there was something even more troubling. No one could confirm if Thomas ever made it out of those woods. After Nathan ran off, he said he never saw Thomas again. No one did. The last confirmed location of Thomas Grady was at the same remote site where Marcus had been buried. If Thomas had met someone else there, someone with a reason to silence him permanently, it would explain everything. The missing man, the burned car, the silence that followed. And as investigators began to dig deeper, they started to realize that Rachel may have known far more than she had ever admitted. Nearly 2 weeks after Thomas Grady vanished, a local fisherman found something strange caught along the edge of the Coldwater River, just outside the Denton Falls town limits. At first, he thought it was a bundle of clothes or debris tangled in the brush. But as he got closer, he realized what he was seeing was a body, badly bloated from the current, face barely recognizable. Authorities were called immediately, and within hours, forensic examiners confirmed what everyone feared. The body belonged to Thomas Grady. The autopsy revealed a single gunshot wound to the chest, the bullet lodged near his spine. There were no signs of defensive injuries, suggesting he hadn't seen it coming. Based on the level of decomposition, Thomas had likely been dead for at least 10 days, placing the time of death within 24 hours of his disappearance. Not far from where his body was discovered, hidden in a thick patch of reeds, search teams found a handgun wrapped in a red flannel shirt. The serial number had been scratched off, but ballistics tests later confirmed it was the same weapon used to kill Marcus Delaney. The mystery had taken a full-circle turn. With both Marcus and Thomas now dead, detectives revisited every angle of the case. Rachel's earlier statements no longer added up. If she feared Thomas so deeply, why hadn't she left him? Why had she waited until after he went missing to report the murder of Marcus Delaney? And most importantly, how did she know where the body was buried with such precise detail? A background check revealed a connection previously missed. Years ago, Rachel had lived under a different last name in a nearby city. During that time, she had briefly dated Marcus Delaney. Their relationship ended badly, and he had been arrested for trespassing at her apartment after their breakup. She had never mentioned this to police, even after Delaney's name surfaced. Investigators now believed this omission was no accident. Confronted with the evidence, prosecutors built a timeline that painted a far different story than the one Rachel had told. It appeared that Marcus Delaney had returned to Rachel's life to blackmail her, threatening to expose secrets from their past that could ruin her reputation and marriage. She had turned to Thomas for help. Whether he agreed willingly or felt trapped by loyalty, he helped her lure Marcus to a remote area and bury his body. But guilt or fear began to eat at Thomas. Months later, he returned to the grave, possibly to move the body, possibly to come clean. Rachel, sensing her husband might betray her to the police, followed him. She confronted him in the woods and shot him. Then she wrapped the gun in her own flannel shirt, ditched his body in the river, and began crafting her cover story, framing Thomas for the entire crime. Her plan might have worked if not for Nathan Bell. If he hadn't come forward, the truth might never have surfaced. Rachel was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. And so, the woman who once claimed to fear her husband turned out to be the one he should have feared all along.